I'm Don Schaefer, and this is the Conversation Lab, a weekly radio program and podcast where we talk with not-for-profit organizations, community groups, and change makers around the world who are doing interesting work. I somehow think that their stories and experiences, in some ways, help shape the way we think about our world. With so many people away at the moment, I was revisiting the archives looking for a conversation that might be uplifting and offer some liminal space, maybe even some hope between the busyness of our lives and doom scrolling. In 2018, I was able to spend some time with Ann Mortifee, who'd been working on her 6th stage play. The musical was called The Mysteries, and she worked on it with David Feinstein and Ed Henderson. While the play has come and gone, the music and book continue, and Ann is a delight to be with. I hope you enjoy getting to know her better. And in our studios, we have Ann Mortifee, who is an author, composer, playwright, and activist, and you've just done so many things in your life. And Monday night, I was sitting in the Stanley Theater, and it was so surreal to see The Mysteries and to see you on stage. And I don't think I've seen you on stage for a long, long time. And it was such a joy. And it was a special moment for a whole bunch of reasons, because of you, because of the cast and the musicians and the songers, the songstress, the singers that you brought together. Easy for me to say. I'm just a little excited, and it almost felt like we were at a rehearsal and we were watching a work in progress, and watching it come alive and watching the parts. And there's just so much that I was thrilled about on Monday. So it's a joy to have you here.
Don, it's great
I can't
to
get
see
it out.
It's great to be here with you, too.
How have you been?
I have been exceptionally well, doing a lot of very interesting things, traveled a great deal, written a lot. And my life is a rich and full life.
It's, I was just thinking, I'm trying to catch up, in a few minutes, 35 years.
Yeah.
So it has been a long time. You've been around the world. You've been to so many countries. You've got the Order of Canada. You've got so many stories to share. And I guess I want to start with The Mysteries, because were there 19 people on stage?
Yeah, 19.
So five musicians. Ed Henderson brought together a beautiful
band.
Yeah, beautiful players.
Beautiful players. Yeah.
And all of the voices that you found were magical.
It was just, it happened like that, magically. When you're doing a showcase or a run through of a show, and it's not a absolute production, you were right. You were watching like a rehearsal, but a showcase that we had worked towards. And we used Musica Intima, which is a fabulous Vancouver choir. They travel all over and do beautiful work. We knew that what Ed and I had put together was just too complex to have people who weren't masters at what they do. And they came together and just were unbelievably supportive. And then all the singers were just extraordinary. And Stephanie Hargraves of the Arts Club Theatre helped me to discover who to invite, because a lot of the people I didn't know previously.
I guess I have you to blame for waking up every morning now singing Backroom Deals.
Between the big boys.
It's a really interesting musical to try and explain on the radio without having the music to play. But let's go back to what the inspiration was for the musical.
Years ago, I read something somewhere that spoke about the Eleusinian mysteries of ancient Greece, which was an initiation that took place in the town of Eleusis, which is 14 miles from the Parthenon in Athens. And every Greek citizen went through this initiation, and sometimes they're slaves if they were favored. And they spent 9 days in the temple of Demeter, the great mother. Mm. And now you often see Demeter in her statues, she's got like a psilocybin mushroom in one hand and a sprig of barley in the other. And they do know that the initiates drank what they called a kyrkion, which was a sacred brew. And people have often wondered, what was it that happened in ancient Greece that created the shift in consciousness that took place there? I mean, democratic governance came out of there. There was a leap in mathematics. There was a leap in astrology and astronomy. I mean, they really brought in so many things, the ancient Greeks.
Yeah.
And so, and a lot of them attested to their time spent in the temple of Demeter as the defining moment of their lives. And so I became, of course, totally fascinated. Many people believe that actually it was like a psychedelic experience because there's an ergot that grows on the barley that has LSD qualities. So they think they might have put the mushroom and the LSD ergot together, but they were transformed by the experience. So I just became totally fascinated. And I started to do a lot of reading about it. And when I came to the myth of Demeter and Persephone, I went, we're stuck halfway through this. We're living this myth right now. And so I became more and more intrigued by it. And the whole thought that consciousness grows over the centuries and that these ancient myths are in our thought forms, in our psyche, certainly in the psyche of the Western culture. And maybe we're living out something that was set in motion 2,000 years ago. So, of course, off I went.
Yeah. Okay, I think I got a good idea here. That's fun.
Yeah.
But you're no stranger to myth either.
No, I've been fascinated in myth my whole life. I really have.
Now I'm going to just, Joseph Campbell, does he do anything for you?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Love his work. And one of my closest friends who I worked on the mysteries with in conversation is a man by the name of David Feinstein.
Sure. You've been around, he's been in your life for a while.
For a long time. And our relationship is a mythic relationship.
Which is terrific.
We talk about myth all the time. We talk about consciousness, how human beings are evolving. How does myth play into that? David actually wrote a book called Personal Mythology, and I do workshops with him, supporting people to look at their own personal myth, and that sometimes you're living a myth that does not serve you. And that can happen on a personal level, and it's certainly happening on a collective level.
I feel Carl Jung is in the room.
Yeah, he's there too. I love Carl Jung.
So The Mysteries is a really interesting musical. And what's so fascinating is that there's centuries of history in the musical, and you've given it a really current feel. When you observe this musical, you can see what's happening all around us.
That was what drew me to this particular myth of the abduction of Persephone into the underworld, the goddess of spring.
Yeah.
And her mother, Demeter, and how the two of them became victimized by the king of heaven, by Zeus. And I've been interested for a long time in the history of our spiritual traditions and religions because they really are like a template for how we're evolving as a species and what our capacity for thought is. And so in looking at this, it really it exemplifies the time when the feminine principle was taken underground and the masculine principle, and I don't mean that as men, I mean that as the male thought form, which is more on a vertical thing. It goes, it's about moving forward, moving upward, whereas the feminine is more embracing. It's about relationship and compassion. And so
symbolically, Zeus sells Persephone or gives Persephone,
his daughter, to Hades.
Yeah.
And Hades, to me, interestingly enough, he is the lord of the underworld, but he's also the lord of wealth, which is interesting.
Yeah.
All the jewels and all the wealth is in the underworld. So he, to me, represents our inner subconscious realm where the shades or the shadow of ourselves, the things we don't know, the things that are dead in us, are not alive, we don't have access to, are there. And so Persephone, and I think most of us go through a death. We get drawn into the underworld at some point in our lives. A humiliation, a failure, an abduction, a rape, who knows what it is.
A marriage, whatever.
A marriage, marriage can be a going into the underworld. So I became really interested in what turns Persephone from a victim into queen of the underworld. And I haven't fully explored that to the depth. I needed to hear the whole of the music moved like on the other last night, a couple of nights ago.
Is that the first time you've done that?
Yeah.
So that was the first real feedback.
Yes.
I mean, a rehearsal with just the players would be one thing, but with a live audience in front of you,
it's very helpful.
You feel that energy coming back. But you know what I'm fascinated by is that you actually, the whole cast, I guess that's the right term, stayed on stage afterwards and took feedback from 400 or 500 people.
Yeah, 650 people, actually.
There you go. It was a big theater.
It was a big
It was
theater,
very full.
Yeah.
But, it was interesting to hear the feedback and see how it was received.
Very interesting. And a lot of people wrote to me. So, you realize we are who we are. We perceive reality where we are. So one card I got said, I had no idea you were a misogynist and that you had no sense of value for women and could actually allow Persephone to fall in love with her abductor. So that was one. The other one was, I just really admired how you were allowed to bring forgiveness for Hades into it so that they could actually move on and be in the underworld together. There's a song, Surrender.
Yeah.
Someone said, I felt it was disgraceful that Persephone surrendered to Hades. Someone else wrote, it was fantastic how Persephone was able to surrender to her own nature and to what was intended for her. In other words, her destiny.
Yeah.
And so I got to see gaps in the way I was communicating. Perhaps I could have been clearer about certain aspects. But also, I had to surrender to the fact that we are where we are.
There's what I found fascinating about the process was there's a real vulnerability in you and the cast to listen and take that feedback and sit with it, and then decide as this musical evolves what to do with it. Because I'm certain in this in the lifespan of this project that there's an ebb and flow, that some parts will get longer, some parts will get shorter, some things will disappear, some things will be added as a result of the feedback.
Absolutely.
And in its growth.
Absolutely. And after the show was over and I went home and I said, the thought of having to rewrite one word is so exhausting. I cannot even face this.
It sounds like an essay or a thesis. Yes, I understand.
Like a thesis.
Yes, I get
However, then you get the little glimpse of a greater awareness.
Yeah.
And suddenly you're off and running.
Well, there are moments in flow where you either are overwhelmed because you're dry and there's nothing there, or you are full of ideas and creative.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting process.
It's a very interesting process. And I think for me, because everything I write is about my quest to understand who we are, where we are, why we are, I don't mind the criticisms. I used to, when I was younger, I used to feel hurt if people didn't understand me. Now I'm just intrigued.
I think that's called projection.
Yes, exactly.
So
yeah,
we do learn that after a while.
Yeah. And so, I love the myth. And really, myths were supposed to evolve. They weren't supposed to stay stagnant. They were never written down. And then when we started writing them down, I mean, even the Bible was not written down for 200 years until, Christ had been gone for 200 years. So the myth grew up around it. And the myth, in a way, serves us to find our way